Good afternoon, everybody. I see we got Richard. I think we're just going to wait a little bit more to see if we get a few more folks joining us, and then we'll start. So I think what we're going to do is ask people to turn off their video and their speaker during the presentation, and then after the presentation we'll have everybody come back and we'll turn videos and microphones on and we'll have a discussion, and hopefully you'll all stay around for that so we can have a really meaningful discussion after the presentation. Well, why don't we go ahead and I just muted myself. So good afternoon and welcome to District 10 Como Community Council's second episode in the series for Race Equity Sunday Speaker Series. The first one that we had was a couple of weeks ago, and that one has been recorded and it's on our website. You can find it on Facebook. It's out there. And we're really excited to have Richard McLemore II with us today. And then in another couple of weeks, November 8th, we'll have Mapping Prejudice with us to speak as well. I'm Jill Henriksen. I'm a board member on District 10, and I'm also a member of their anti-racism work group. And I just want to thank you for being with us on this cold and snowy October day. We are recording this as well. So if you want to see it again, if folks were not able to be on this, we can certainly make this available, and we certainly want to make this available out in the community so that as many people can see it as possible. In the work of the anti-racism work group is kind of twofold. I'll just mention it quickly before introducing Richard. We're looking internally at our kind of programs and practices and our culture in our district council, and examining them against equity measures, kind of that equity lens. And then also it's an external work so that we can look for potential partnerships with other district councils and other nonprofit organizations that are doing equity work that we might be able to partner in that work. So it's kind of twofold, and we're just kind of beginning this, and this equity speaker series is a part of that work. I think on that note, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Richard McLemore II is the executive director of McLemore Holdings, located in St. Paul, Minnesota. McLemore Holdings is an African-American, culturally inclusive organization focused on providing holistic professional development workshops, renters and home buyers education courses, wealth building courses, and healing circles. He's a 3-time college graduate, most recently graduating from Metropolitan State University with a focus in psychology. Prior to his current position, Richard was the housing director at Ujamaa Place, while simultaneously acting as program manager for Alternatives to Violence Project Minnesota. He dedicates his time facilitating psychosocial workshops on mental and emotional healing for practitioners at state and federal prisons, juvenile facilities, and county jails across the nation. Richard is also a circle keeper with the City of St. Paul's Ethos Diversion Restorative Justice Program. He also founded the Community Diversion Program, which is an extension of the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative. Richard is also on the board of directors for We Are All Criminals and the Dispute Resolution Center, and is in the midst of writing his autobiography. I had personally the opportunity to meet Richard when he was working at Ujamaa Place. And we have kept in touch, and I am so impressed with the work that he is doing. And I am just thrilled that he agreed to come and share his story and his wisdom with us today. And I am so grateful that I can call him my friend. So with that, Richard, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Jill. Just like to do a little mic check. How am I coming across? My earpods aren't working this morning. So it's one of them days. Am I coming across okay? Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me okay, Jill? Yes, okay. I'm seeing some yeses from the chat. Okay, Jill, you're on mute. That's okay. I can see your lips moving. So perfect, perfect. Okay. Thank you. So good morning, everybody. My name is Richard from McLemore Holdings. I am an owner and a lead consultant, So I'm really honored today to come talk to District 10 Council about some of the things that I've been doing, like Jill said, in the community, and why I do this work, right? I mean, what's our passion? That's really what it's about. Obviously, it's not because of the money, right? I mean, all right, maybe it's too early in the morning or too early in the afternoon for that joke, right? But she wanted me to come share a little bit about what I do and why I do it. And I am honored to be here today. So with not having a lot of time and the conversation kind of building momentum, I'd like to kind of get right into it. Jill, I know I sent you my presentation, but do I have the ability to share screen right now? Yes, I do. Perfect, very perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so here we go. Okay. All right, can I get a thumbs up? Can everyone see my screen? Is that okay? Is it big enough? And on some screens, it comes in a little box in the corner. Let me see, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Perfect, okay, beautiful. Okay, so Richard from McLemore Holdings, right? I just really want to get right into what I do. I usually have a little presentation that I go through here. Let me see if it'll let me. There we go. Let me change screens. Okay. So what we do at McLemore Holdings, right? What we really do is help people, companies, and communities maximize our most valuable asset. Now, I know Jill asked everyone to turn off their cameras and their microphones because it's a bandwidth issue. However, I'm not in favor of just kind of getting in front of folks and talking at them. I need some conversation. I need to know you're there, right? So I have a question for everyone, like just kind of starting out, right? When you hear me say our most valuable asset, like what is the most valuable asset we have on this plane in this earth right now, right? Can someone chime in? I need someone to just let me know they're out there. What is our most valuable asset? Anybody? Now, I can't monitor the chat, so if you don't unmute yourself and say it, Jill, can you monitor the chat for me? Is that okay?
People.
Okay, I'm hearing people. Okay. What else?
Relationships.
People.
Like how we relate to each other.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Our most valuable asset. Sorry, excuse me?
Time.
Land.
I'm sorry, Joanne, you say something?
I said nature. It meant Jones, by the way.
Jones, I'm sorry, Jones. Nature, okay. Now I'm writing to keep up with these, but I want to know who said time?
That was Libby.
Libby, absolutely right. Time. Anyone know why time? Because I hear money, I hear people, I heard nature, relationships. Why time? Why time is our most, why is that it right there? Why is that the end all? Anybody?
It's non-renewable.
My, that is so good. That is so good. Who is that speaking, please? Maybe say your name if you kind of just I know, because there's a lot of people on the screen here, and I do want to keep this as engaging as possible. Who is this, sir?
Mike Ireland.
Mike, Mr. Ireland. Okay. And say that one more time.
It's a non-renewable resource.
It's a non-renewable resource. That is an amazing way to say it. It's a non-renewable resource. It's something we can't get back, right? Linda Ellis describes it in her eloquent poem as the dash, right? This little dash that just means so much, right? So at McLemore Holdings, when we're talking about doing our work, right, and really we're a for-profit company that operates as a nonprofit. Now, a lot of people ask me, why didn't you just start a nonprofit? And that is a whole different conversation. But to be totally transparent and absolutely clear, I needed to maintain control of my intellectual properties. The work I do is serious. It's life-changing. I know it. I've seen it. I've done it. So I really didn't want a board. I didn't want someone else directing the course or changing the director I needed this work to go, right? So we are a for-profit company doing nonprofit work. And some of the things we do are trainings, psychosocial and undertone. We work with a lot of new practitioners, case managers, specifically housing case managers, stabilization case managers, maybe workforce case managers. But we deal with a lot of nonprofit agencies, as you'll see. The other thing we do is facilitate community circles. Now, anyone ever hear of the circle process? The circle process. Anyone out there ever hear of that?
I've heard of it in a school context. This is Libby.
Hey, Libby, thank you so much. I heard of it in a school context. Has anyone else have heard of it in any other context?
No.
No. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. And I figured that, right. And the reason I'm asking that is because the circle process can be used in almost any capacity. It's scalable. It's diverse. It's engaging. And what it really does is it levels the playing field. The great thing about circles, when you're in circle, everybody has a voice and everyone has the opportunity to listen to that individual when they're expressing themselves. It's based in a circle format. There's usually a talking piece so you know who has opportunity to talk. There's rules put in place called guidelines before you start, and there's a definitive beginning and there's a definitive end. So while you're in circle, you know it. Now, if you've ever been in circle, and this is no disrespect to any circle keepers, and you didn't feel like you were in circle, like there was a definite difference when you were in circle and out of circle, that may not have been a good example of circle. But it's a powerful process. And I like that Libby said it's used in the educational system because we have a lot of conflict. We have a lot of young folks that can't seem to get along. I mean, it's hard right now, especially with social distancing. But before that, there was these engagement issues. So the circle process is used in educational systems specifically to empower youth to regulate themselves, really. Some of the agencies I work with, like you see up under there, Pacific One DRC, Dispute Resolution Center. We actually go into school and we train the young folks. We train the 11th and 12th graders to do circles with the 9th and 10th graders. And then when those 9th and 10th graders become 11th and 12th graders, we train them up, make them circle keepers and start giving back to the younger folks in their school. So it's an incredible process. It's an empowering process. And I appreciate that folks out here are somewhat aware of it. But for those who aren't, we're not, just a little bit about circle. And then the last thing, my bread and butter, this is my passion. Trauma-informed coursework in housing. Now we throw that word, that phrase around trauma-informed. I want to make sure we're clear on what trauma-informed really means when we're talking about housing. Anyone got any ideas maybe? Maybe I'm preaching to the choir here. What do you think trauma-informed means when we're talking about housing, specifically helping people with their housing? Any ideas, folks? Okay.
The way I think about it would be that losing housing or stability, which is linked in with so many other basic needs, can be really, really traumatic in a lot of different ways. And so moving through housing options and how to talk to landlords or other like people, property managers, things like that can be really difficult to do if you've had, bad or traumatic experiences with it. So leading from that lens that people need support to do that would be, I would assume, like really helpful.
Yes, yes, that is a great assumption. What was your name? I'm sorry.
I'm M. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you were going to say go ahead, finish what you're saying, ma'am. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say I'm the community organizer for Como Park, so I'm gonna try to leave space for like other people to answer as well.
Okay, okay. Well, I want everyone to have a chance to engage, so thank you so much. Yes, yes. So anyone else? Anyone else? Trauma informed?
This is Libby again. I'm a family therapist, so I also am trying to leave room for folks. Meaning understanding that things like choices of language, who is present and left out of groups may change people's ability to participate based on what they've experienced and how that impacts them in the moment. And that can be basic living skills, definitely communication skills, and is super relevant to conflict resolution.
Very good. I love that you said communication skills. Wow. Now, I was looking for something along those lines, right? But I'm also looking to see what folks know and don't know, and that's okay if you're still kind of gray on the term, right? I had Em and Libby chime in and gave great explanations. Trauma informed. Being able to communicate and understanding that folks have been through something if you're a service provider, even in a supervisory capacity where you're providing services, one of the foundational things you have to understand is that your clientele has been through some things. That's how they got there. If they had not been going through some stuff as a service provider, you will not meet them, right? So just understanding people. And I really love that you brought up the communication piece, because sometimes we try so hard, we like over communicate, or we try to dumb down, let's just be honest, right? What we say, and really sometimes what we do and how we treat people because of perceived notions, right? But when we're informed of where they've been and we understand it, maybe empathize a little bit, it's so much easier to provide services because you're seeing them on an equal level, right? You're seeing them as a human being and not a client or a job or a 9-to-5, or I wish I could get done with this individual so I can go home. It just changes your perspective. So thank you, Em. Thank you, Libby, for really just kind of diagnosing and just dissecting trauma-informed. But at McLemore Holdings Trauma-Informed Coursework and Housing, what that means is when we're talking to individuals, when we're teaching classes, when we're educating, facilitating, and really that's what I do. I facilitate conversations because I truly believe that we have all the information we need. I really do. We can share information and be great together, right? It's not just me. So in facilitating this housing conversation, what I'm really trying to do is help people get to the next level. Now, it's always assumed when I talk about housing classes that I'm talking to a certain population. Now, I usually ask folks what population you think, but I assume you folks know, right? The homeless. Whenever I start talking about housing education, people always want to push me to maybe the Dorothy Day Center, or you know, well, one of the facilities like Harbor Lights, or you know, Union Gospel Mission here in east of the Mississippi, right? So you have these ideas, these preconceived notions around who needs help and who needs education in housing. Now, I could ask you, but I already know the answer. Has anyone ever had any type of comprehensive housing course in their traditional K-12 education? I mean, just think about this. One of the most important aspects of our existence, our housing, where we live, where we de-stress, where we get away from the day, where we feel safe or should feel safe. One of the biggest bills we will have for most of our life is speed bump by the entire educational system. And we really never talk about it in a capacity that I do in my courses so people understand before they get into it. Because once you get into housing and you make a mistake, the hole is so deep and it's so hard to get out of because you still don't know what you're doing. And that's the problem, because you need it, but you're not sure how to do it. Well, I wish someone could feel that right now. You know, I'm gonna let the amens die down, right? And I'm just kind of scanning as I talk. I look at some people that are like thumbs up and just kind of acknowledging, right? And I know we have our cameras off. Just pause for a second. I want everyone to. Oh yeah, we have time. I want everyone to do do a favor for me, if you will, okay? Now, I know it's an afternoon where we're doing this online platform, and if you don't feel comfortable, that's okay. But what I would ask, if you're able to, can you turn on your cameras? Not your microphones, but just your cameras right now. I'd like to see your face. I'd like to say good morning to you or say good afternoon to you, if you can. If you can't, that's perfectly okay. But if you can, I'd really ask that you turn on your cameras. Okay. I can't move around to really see. There we go. Now I can move around. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to give everyone a second. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, right? This online thing, this communicating through Zoom and all these other platforms, Microsoft Teams, there's an effect to this, right? I always talk about this Zoom effect, how it gets to, I mean, you know, like me, I'm sure you folks are on these Zoom calls, and I'm just using Zoom as an overarching, right? These Zoom meetings for hours every single day, looking at this screen, looking at this side of the screen, looking at this little corner, trying to respond with a little comment down here in time so it happens in real time, right? But it has an effect on us. I'm just going to be honest, right? We don't always pay the best attention when we're on this platform because it's easy to get distracted. We're at home, kids, dogs, other responsibilities. I'm at my desk and I can really just do this paperwork. I'm at my computer and I really want to respond to this email. But I want to ask you guys, I want to ask you folks, what is the number one thing? What is the number one thing we do on this platform that we've learned to distract ourselves, sometimes keep us engaged, but to distract ourselves when we're on these calls? What is it? What do you think? What is it? Do we email? Do we turn off our camera and go get something to eat? What is it that we do? And please be honest. Please, completely honest. This is a conversation.
We look at each other and we look at ourselves.
We look at each other and we look at ourselves. Okay. Anything else? I saw an example there. Okay.
Ice cream breaks.
Ice cream breaks. Now we're getting somewhere, right? We're doing something productive now. We're getting up, we're getting the blood flowing, and we're grabbing some ice cream while we're up. I mean, why not? I mean, right? We're going that way, right? Okay. And now if you have the headphones, what's really nice is you can walk all over the house and leave your computer there. You know what I mean? It's still like feel like you're engaging in the conversation. So I want let me one more. What's one other thing that we do? And be honest with me, what do we do to distract ourselves sometimes on these long Zoom meetings, Zoom calls?
We can control what others see of us, how they see us, and when we don't want them to see us, much more than in a face-to-face meeting.
Oh, that's right. So you can control that. You can play with that even. You know, you can do that in real time. You can change your background. You can mute your video so no one see you. And some of us got those placeholder pictures or really fancy titles and things like that, right? Yes. Well, you know what I do? And Miss McKernan, if I'm pronouncing it right, I think she held it up. Can you see what I have in my hand? Oh my God. Yes. This is the number one pacifier when we're on this platform. We sit right here, right below I'm seeing some smiles. That's right. It is okay. We all do it right with our phone right here. And it's so easy to be engaged in this conversation while taking care of this business, right? So in knowing that, and just kind of liking and using what we have, I want to ask you folks to do something for me. I would like you to take, beautiful baby Sarah. I got a 10-month old, so when I see a kid, I just love it. I'm so sorry, but I love it. All right, so using these devices, I would like you to do a favor for me. Let's call it an exercise. I would like you to use these devices and Google that name. Now, I'm gonna give everybody a few minutes, and what I may even do is turn off my camera, just to kind of take a minute. And then I'm gonna come back, but I ask that you leave on your cameras, please. Just leave on your cameras. And then we're gonna have a conversation in a second or two. Thank you, everybody. So let's have a different conversation now. When you introduced me today, Jill, you did an amazing job of talking about who I was and who I am professionally, right? And we do this a lot. We do this a lot. I've actually perfected it because as you folks now see, I have to. So I want to have a different conversation about where I came from, because when we started off, I said this work was important to me. And as a company, as McLemore Holdings, I'm held in a certain regard. I'm a business owner. I'm a landlord. I'm a community member. I'm a board member. You know, all those titles, you know, when I go into rooms, people call me sir. But every once in a while, someone picks up their device and they want to know, who really is this sir? And then they see what you folks read. And everything changes. I'm just going to be honest. Now, I'd like to talk about this for a little bit because my life didn't begin or end when I made the decision to take someone's life. Now, I'm always honest about what I did. Even though I was 17 years old, I take full responsibility for it. I'm a practitioner. I get the whole thing about, you know, the gray matter and your brain not being fully developed until your mid-20s. I mean, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, I made a decision that resulted in someone losing their life. And because of that, I was sentenced to 27 years in prison. And that was after a year of really fighting to stay out, get out one day. I'm sure as folks read through and scale through some of the things that's in my history, it talks about that. At 17 years old, I was actually charged with not one count, not two counts, but 3 counts. And 2 of them were first-degree murder. Now, just a little education on the criminal justice system in Minnesota, when you get a first-degree murder, they usually don't let you out. And if they do, it's decades, 40, 50 years down the road. And another thing in Minnesota, if you get found guilty on all the charges, you have to serve time on all of it individually. So just understand, at 17 years old, my life took a drastic turn, and I thought I was ready for it, but I wasn't, because of the circumstances my life had fooled me to believe that I was grown when I was still a child. Like I was saying, my life didn't start and end when I decided to take someone's life. My life actually began in California. Born and raised, right? There's some visuals here which I'm going to kind of talk about and just use, like I said, for that just some people like seeing things, right? They need to know, right? And I understand that. I like to use my senses as well, and just packaging this. Where I came from looks more like the top right corner. Now you have to look at this picture, LBC, Long Beach, California, specifically the east side of Long Beach. Now, for those who understand what I mean by the east side of Long Beach, the east side of Long Beach is comparable in its poverty rate to places like Watts, Compton, California, certain places in Chicago. Huge, huge disparities in this community. And it's been like that forever, and it's never going to change. It's never going to change. So this was my neighborhood. And what's interesting about this is you look at this house and you look at the grass, you know, you see some shrubbery to your left, you're like, that's not, I mean, throw some grass in there. It's not so, but that's not my house in the front. See, in California, especially in the cities where it's highly populated, the zoning laws are a little bit different. They don't really care. So there's a front house, there's a middle house, and then there's a garage. And it's perfectly legal to add on little homes all over your property out there, especially in certain neighborhoods. So my mother and I actually lived in a small little house, and our access was the alley. Now that's very important, because when you have to come in and out of an alley, especially at night, and you're a woman with a small child, it's not the safest thing to do. Another thing that's not safe in my neighborhood when I was growing up is walking to school. Now, we see this, we hear this in movies and things like this. We see the documentaries and people sit down and they talk about this stuff, you know, but the reality is that it's real. Like street gangs in California are just like that. They're based on your street. So if you walk 3 blocks, you may encounter 3 different gangs. And that's how my life was growing up for years. Every single day I went to school, I had to walk just 3 blocks to the bus stop. And every day I had to decide if I was going to run or fight, run or fight, run or fight. And I couldn't call in sick. I couldn't, my mom wasn't going for that. The one thing she wanted was me to go to school to get an education. So I never called in sick. Even when I didn't feel good, I always went to school. And you know how hard it is running to a bus stop when you feel like you have the flu? How bad it sucks getting jumped on when you don't feel good? And that's just how it was, right? And I'm gonna be honest, I thought that was everyone's reality. I thought that was how it was. Hey, this is how it is for everyone. We're kids, you fight, you know, you live, you move on, hopefully, right? If you don't end up like some of the folks I used to see in my neighborhood, right? So, it's fast forwarding a little bit, right? My mother, she tried. I adore my mother. My mother is an angel to me because she did everything she could to provide for me. Now, this picture you see wasn't necessarily where we started, but this is where I grew up. We ended up here really just circumstances. I'm going to school one day. My mom drops me off like she does every other day. She had just got a brand new Honda Accord. And at this time, like these Accords were new and they're fancy, but they're also made of like plastic, right? So she's on the 405 freeway, the biggest freeway in California. It has like 8 lanes and traffic there is real. Traffic there is dead stop, meaning you can put your car in park, which people do, and you can even turn off your car. Traffic is serious. So she's in this traffic one day. And along comes this semi truck. Now, this was before they had laws around how long you could operate a vehicle without getting sleep, right? You could just haul and go and go. So this guy, not a bad guy, just doing his job, unfortunately had been driving for too long. And going about 75 miles an hour, he fell asleep. Going down the 405 freeway. And one of the first cars he ran into before he opened his eyes was my mom's car. He knocked my mom's car so far off the freeway that he wrapped it around a tree, like around a tree. For all intents and purposes, my mother should not be here with us today, right? She should not be here with me, but she is. But she wasn't the same person anymore. It took 7 back surgeries and about 30 years. Medical science had to catch up for my mother to walk again. But it did happen. Unfortunately, at that time, it didn't happen fast enough. So she lost her job. We lost friends. She lost relationships. I lost hope. And we ended up in the LBC. Now, the pictures I don't talk about, or haven't talked about, I should say, are in the bottom right corner. That was before the fall. That was before my mother's accident, right? You can kind of see just a look on my face. I mean, I'm outgoing, I'm joyful. I don't know where I got like those pink or red socks from, right? But everything I did was live and it was fun and I like having a good time. I remember that part of my life. But then things started to take a change. And it even got worse than the LBC because you still have to pay rent. You have to pay bills even for that place, and we couldn't keep up. So we found ourselves living in a car, you know, and I'm young. My mom does a great job of packaging things. You know, I thought I was like I had the greatest life in the world because I got to wake up at McDonald's Playland every day and play. Every morning I got to go to McDonald's Playland. Every morning I got a McDonald's big breakfast, sometimes pancakes, but every morning I was like, man, this is great, right? I didn't know. It was an adventure. It was fun. My mom was always outgoing. She put on a good face, but we were living in a car, sleeping at rest stops, right? So my mother ends up getting pneumonia. almost dies the second time. Now, my family here in Minnesota, and I have a very large family here in Minnesota, I have a lot of relatives here. They start calling, specifically my grandmother, asking my mother, what are you doing? What's going on out there in California with my grandson? What do you have? What, you know, what? She had no answers, no questions. She didn't know. She was flabbergasted because my grandmother did not raise my mother to live on an island. You have family. What are you doing? So my grandmother sent my mother $200. Now at this time, more than enough to pay for hotel room for a night, get us gas, food, whatever, $200. And she said, drive my grandbaby up here to Minnesota and you live with me. You know. That's how my grandmother talks, you know, the fingers and all that, you know. So we drive up here. My grandmother can't wait to see me. I used to come up here for summers. I'd always run and hug her. You know, she's a short little Mexican lady, you know, I mean, from Mexico City. And I mean, obviously you don't see it with me. Yes, I'm half Mexican, right? So I would run up to my grandmother and she'd kiss on me and love on me. And I love seeing my grandmother. But my grandmother didn't realize that I wasn't the same grandson that she knew, the sweet kid, the one you see in the bottom right corner who loved Christmas and always was smiling and just wanted to be outside and play with kids. I wasn't that kid anymore. See, it was insidious and it was slow, but places like the LBC, places like living in a car, fighting every day, it changed me. And it was subtle, so I didn't know it. But I'll tell you, when I came back to Minnesota, my family knew it right away because they're like, oh my God, who is that? So if you look at the picture in the bottom middle, I'm wearing a Morehouse shirt, big gaudy chain, right? I started becoming that person when I was still 12 years old. Because when I was 12 years old, I decided that I was the man of the house. And because it was just me and my mother, I'm going to do grown things, meaning I have to make grown money. Now, I like to tell folks, I tried. I worked at McDonald's. I worked at the fair. I worked at Old Country Buffet. I worked at my high school. I shoveled snow. I cut grass. I did everything you can to help provide for my family because my mother is still convalescing. She's still going through what she's going through, so she can't work. So even though we're in Minnesota, we're still struggling. I love my grandmother, but I don't want to live with my grandmother. She lives in a 2-bedroom house and has 7 people in it. We don't have, I don't want, we were better off living in the car. So I try. But in Minnesota, as a teen, you only can work 17 hours in a week. They have these stipulations as children, you know, and I understand that. But for me, that didn't work because I needed to provide. So I had learned some things in California, living in the LBC, how to provide in that neighborhood, how they did it in that neighborhood. And I took those neighborhood tactics and I brought them to Minnesota. Things like stealing cars. But I didn't just steal your car. I would steal 6 cars and I would pay a bunch of my friends and we would drive them all to Chicago and sell them to chop shops. Jump on the bus, come back. Now, this is all before I was 15, by the way. Because by the time I was 15, I realized that stealing cars doesn't make enough money. It's hard, it's dangerous. You know, Chicago is really dangerous. So I said, you know what? Let's try something else. But I didn't know what it was at the time. So one day I'm sitting in my neighborhood. By now, at that time, we're living in on Eaglehart in the Rondo community in St. Paul. Enriched neighborhood, right? A lot of history, but once again, an impoverished neighborhood. So it looks really similar to where I came from. So it seemed okay to do the same things. So one of my friends walked up to me one day and he had his hand out. And in his hand, he had 3 little rocks. And he says, man, these are going to change our lives. And what it was crack cocaine. Now I've seen it. I'd seen it around, but I don't know what to do with this. So he's like, come on, man, let's go. Let's just try. So we go outside. At this time, I'm about 14-ish. I'm pushing 15. And we try to sell drugs. Now, in my childlike mind, okay, this is what you do. I have to do something, right? The very first time I sold drugs, I got robbed. Guy saw what I had, took it from me, walked off, turned around, challenged me. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Now I'm a 15-year-old kid. This is a grown man. I'm looking up at him, and I know I'm not going to do nothing. But I can honestly tell you, at that point, I made a decision that I would never be robbed again. So let me ask you, what do you think? What do you guys think I did to make sure that I never ever got robbed again? What do you think I went and did? Any ideas?
Get a
Like
gun.
armed yourself, or yeah.
I armed myself. I got a gun, right? Because I have a dangerous career now, and it requires protection. And in my young mind, I feel like I'm entitled. Like, okay, this is what you do. If I'm in this dangerous environment, why wouldn't I? And they're readily available in my neighborhood. I mean, everywhere you go, people are trying to trade and barter illegal stuff. So it's really easy to get a gun. The first firearm I ever owned was a 22. It looked like it was at a Western. It just looked like it was one of those old school Western white pearl handle revolvers. It looked like a toy, but it was a very real life weapon. And I pause because I think back how easy it was to acquire something like that as such a young kid. And that's absolutely devastating as an adult, but back then it seemed like the perfect thing to be in a neighborhood where you can get anything you want if you had money. Illegal, doesn't matter. And that's also interesting when it's that available in impoverished neighborhoods. I've always kind of wondered, how do impoverished neighborhoods, if you can't pay your rent, but you have all these other things, right? Right. Guns are expensive, by the way. I mean, I know, there's a conceal and carry and people buy firearms, and then guns are expensive. So in protecting myself, I went back out there because, I'm not a punk. I need to make money. And I feel like you robbed me and my mother now because I'm a young boy and I feel like I'm a man and I'm taking care of my mother. I have a responsibility now and I'm going to live up to that responsibility. So unfortunately, I was very, very, very good at selling drugs. By the time I was 17 years old, we didn't live in the hood anymore. I actually lived in a condo in downtown St. Paul. It's still there. It's called The Point. Now, back then, the police annex, for folks who know St. Paul, there used to be a police annex kitty corner from The Point. It's a grocery store and fire station now, parking lot. But I used to live right across the street from the police station, 16th floor. My mother lived in Maplewood, Minnesota, in a 3-bedroom, split level, 2-car garage, amazing home. And you can see it in the background there. So like I said, I was good at it. And I said, unfortunately, because it gave me a false sense of ego, it made me think I was something or somebody, because now all of a sudden I have more money than I can spend. That's one of the reasons I start off this conversation asking, what's our most valuable asset? Because I swear almost every conversation, I thank you so much for not saying it, people always say money. I mean, it's our mode of trading, right? I give you money, I get what I want. No. My 17-year-old mind thought it was money. My 17-year-old mind also got me in some serious trouble because I didn't understand what money was. So in living like that, and it coming from where I came from, I became very dangerous because now this was like my career. I would go to school every single day. I got to be average. And I would act like it was just no big deal, but that was my job. I would go sell drugs during lunch. I would sell them before school. I would stay out till about 3, 4 in the morning. Every morning, I would sleep about 3 hours and then I'd get up for school again. When it was football season, I'd get up at 5 a.m. because I had football practice, which are 2-a-days. I mean, I was an engaged student, but I'm living this life because I felt like I had to, because what are we going to do? My mother is in a bed and she can't provide. And I feel like the world owes me something now. I feel entitled. And really what it was, I was mad. I was scared. And I was scared really of failure. I was scared of going back to, I know where we came from. So in operating that mindset, a day came where someone tried to rob me again. And it didn't work out well for anybody. And after I looked this guy in the eyes, and after I decided that even though he doesn't realize what's about to happen, even though he doesn't know I have this huge gun, because now I'm not carrying a 22 anymore, right? Yeah, he has no idea. I still make the decision to pull out a gun, and I could have just pulled it out, but I didn't. I pulled it out and I used it. And because of that, I was arrested 3 days later at my high school. Now this is after finding out that I had just got a full ride to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. So as I'm getting pulled out the police car and slammed onto the ground, I'm still kind of happy about knowing that I'm about to get out of all of this. I just didn't make it. And I'll never forget, as a St. Paul police officer slammed me to the ground, and I don't mean, it wasn't excessive. I'm not, I mean, he took me to the ground, he put the handcuffs on me, and as he was handcuffing me though, he leaned down. It was an Asian cop. He leaned down really, 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 really close because he didn't want anyone else to hear this. And he whispered in my 17-year-old ear, "When you get out of prison, cars will be flying." And he finished handcuffing me and threw me in the back of the squad car. Now, he was kind of close because like cars are driving themselves now. All the cars look like bubbles, like there's no 90-degree angles on cars no more, if you know what I'm talking about back in the, you know what I mean? Like, and see, all of this made sense for me because when I got out, I had been inside of a cage. And sometimes if I didn't do right, I was inside of another cage for almost 2 decades, from 17 to 37, from March of 1995. And I got arrested in January, but I got processed in March, to May of 2013, my life consisted of living in every single correctional facility Minnesota has to offer outside of Oak Park Heights because I was too young. I was too young, or they'd have sent me there too. I went to all of them. I've been to Moose Lake. I've been to Lino. I've been to Faribault. I've been to Stillwater. Been to all of them, right? I started in St. Cloud like most people do. I've been to all of them. You would think, right, after the experiences I've had, that it would have kind of an adverse effect because now I'm around Minnesota's worst. I'm surrounded by it all the time. And I'm gonna be quite honest, in prison, a lot of the conversation is about hustling, how to continue doing it, because really there's a lot of mental instability in those places. And people don't understand that the conversation folks have is all they can see. That's it. That's the world. That's all they know. So when they come to these places, that's what they talk about. So a lot of people think that it would have had an adverse effect. And that's kind of why we're here today. And that's why I have this talk, because people think it would have been so easy just to get out and continue to be mad, continue to want to get mine back. And I'm going to explain that a little bit. When you have that entitlement, thing, you feel like someone owes you something. You're always going to say, I want to get, it's a term, I want to get mine back. I'm going to get that back. So a lot of folks feel like I would have that air about me, that suit. And I'm going to be honest with you folks, a lot of people who come out of correction do not. And it's not the experience that makes those incarcerated or those justice impacted change their thinking. It doesn't matter. right? It doesn't matter if you're in Chino in California or if you're in Oak Park Heights here in Bayport, Minnesota. What changes, folks, is time. Time. You're removed from a situation, yes, but it's the time to sit and reflect and really have to get to know yourself that changes individuals when they're incarcerated. So now tying this back together, and I want to have a few minutes for questions. The reason I'm saying this is because originally we were talking about providing services, right? We're talking about helping people. I talked about housing and why I do this work. And this is why, because I get it. I get it. I've been through it. I understand it. I get being upset with every system and mad at every person I talk to and feeling like I just can't get no help. And every time I try, someone knocks you down. I get it. I get it so well, now I train people on it. So with that being said, I am going to open it up a little bit. I know we're about an hour, but I do want to say that you can ask me anything. I like this to be open. I like this to be honest. I'm an open book, and I like this to be educational. So if you don't get your questions answered, I don't want you to leave feeling like you missed something. So Jill, do you want to kind of quarterback this piece? You know, I can't see the chat still because I'm in here. Maybe I can get out of here because I just have my thank you for this conversation, which we don't need this because we're going to talk a little bit longer. So I'm going to just kind of get out of here. We'll stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Yeah,
Yes.
if anybody's got a question or a comment or an observation, please just, you know, take off your mute and join the conversation. Or let's start a conversation.
I'm seeing some. I say get a gun. Okay, this is okay. Now I'm finally starting to see the chat. Go ahead, ma'am.
I have a question, maybe comment. Since May 29th, I've been trying to educate myself about race relations in this country, mostly by reading, mostly out of despair of what is happening here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm retired. I've lived pretty much most of my life in Minnesota without ever realizing what an apartheid state I live in.
Mm.
And
Wow.
one of the books I read was just finished was The New Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
And that left me just reeling at the magnitude of the problem. Housing seems to be a piece of it. But I guess my question is, you seem to have taken housing as the piece that you can work on.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Are you asking why that I chose housing specifically?
Yeah, because
Yes.
you know, is it drug treatment? Is it looking at our whole judicial system, which is stacked against people like you, even if you hadn't been violent with a gun?
Mm-hmm.
The whole crack versus powder, et cetera, but why did you choose housing as the piece that you could start with, that you could do something about?
Yes, Julie. Thank you so much for that question. Yes, so housing, it's a foundational piece. Everyone needs it, right? And I didn't talk about this a lot, but it's also our biggest bill in our lifetime. Housing is one of our biggest bills in our lifetime. It's a consistent bill. We're going to have it every month. We always talk about owning a home. Just a side note, you know, banks own homes. If you miss payments, you default on anything, you lose that home, right? So we still have payments. We still have these obligations. And people don't talk about that. You don't realize, you know, what a responsibility it is to be a homeowner, to be a renter, because it's not just about the rent. It's not just about the mortgage. There's other things that play into that. There's responsibilities as a tenant, because you don't own this property and you don't always know that level of respect because you were never taught that. I didn't know that I'm supposed to cut the grass, that I'm supposed to clean out the drain, that I got to put the electric bill in my name. No one told me that. That's what I mean by the hole. And with housing, when you fall down the hole, specifically when you get a UD, you know, an eviction, it's so deep. And I'm a landlord. That's one of the number one things people look at. They always talk about criminal backgrounds. And no. Landlords want to know what your housing history is. Because we understand that you'll put it towards the top, but it may not be at the very top. And that's what we need to know, right? So housing education is vital, because if you don't know what you're doing, when you step into one of the most consistent, one of the biggest bills you have in your lifetime, and you mess that up, it snowballs. It turns everything in your life upside down. You can't keep employment without housing. It's hard to keep good relationships without housing. It's hard to maintain your mentality without housing. So it ties into everything. So when I got out, I was released to a garage floor. I lived on a garage floor, right? Because my mother didn't have housing. She didn't have a place I can go, but it was my time to go. So I could either go to a Roach Motel that takes people coming out of prison, but they had bed bugs at the time. So I couldn't go there. So I ended up going to an address that they approved, but I lived in the garage. So I took it on personally, and I took it on because I realized through my experiences in housing, my first place cost me $1,500 for a studio, right? I learned a lot. So I just knew how important it was, how pivotal it is to success. So when I started doing this work, I wanted others that are going through experiences. Now, just to be honest, I don't really work with folks coming out of jail. My housing courses, my stabilization courses, right now, I'm working with a lot of colleges, the law schools, about 2 of the law schools, and I'm working with a lot of veterans, because we all need housing. We need to know how to not only get it, but keep it. Yeah. So it helped me, and I wanted to extend it on to people, Julie, and people just really don't get how important it is, and how dismissive we are with understanding it.
So, so my daughter's African American, and she had somewhat troubled high school career, and met a lot of people in that way that also were somewhat troubled. And she eventually went to the High School for Recording Arts, where there were a lot of students there who, some of them were homeless, some of them weren't, but came from a lot of bad backgrounds. And so what I see is a housing issue, because I'm trying to find housing for my daughter right now, who has some mental illness issues. And so what I worry about is, see a need for is for helping kids who don't have a lot of family to support them. And my daughter fortunately has me to help her, but other kids who don't have people to support them, who might have mental health illness issues, who might have, again, not a course on how to even find a rental place. And I was wondering, what resources there are for people like that.
Thank you. So what you're talking about is the housing with services model, right? Where you have your housing really is tied to some type of programming that keeps you engaged in the community. Unfortunately, those programs are far in between. They are out there. Don't get me wrong, they're out there. There's tons of them. I'm going to just advise you to be careful with programs you look into. Okay, Julie, sorry, Julie has to leave soon. Okay, thank you, Julie. I would advise you to be careful with looking into those programs, because I'm gonna tell you something I've learned about those programs. They're big money makers. Housing with services companies are huge money makers. Like, you get paid, 10 grand for this client, 10 grand. So a lot of times the folks that get into this business don't necessarily do it for the right reasons. Now, the reason I can say that is because I just had my first son, right? I never thought I was gonna have any kids. I never thought I'd be the type of person to be able to be responsible for someone else. Now I have a baby, right? But my baby was diagnosed with Down syndrome. So I'm in the same boat where I know my child is going to need support after I'm gone. And I struggle with the same thing. What do I do with my child, right? I went so far as I planned on opening up my own housing with service agency. I got the business plan, I got the funding, and then I went to DHS, Department of Human Services, to get licensed. And I found out, lo and behold, because I have a criminal background, I have a lifetime ban, right? So even though I know I could do it and I'd do a great job at it because I'd have a personal investment in my child needing this housing after, like I need them to be stable when I leave. Like when my dash is over, I want my baby to be okay. But I can't even make an investment in their future because I have a criminal background. So I'm in the same boat. We should connect by email. I do have some resources because I've done a lot of looking. I've looked at models because what I plan on doing, to be honest, is I'm going to start a community. We're going to start with a home and we're going to build it into community. And it's going to be for folks with developmental disabilities. And then I'm going to make sure that my kids own it. They'll have someone executing it. They'll have family looking out for them. So there's those checks and balances. But when I die, at least I know that my children are going to have housing and income for life. Yeah. So we should talk because you really want to do your homework on a lot of housing and services company because you want to look at longevity because you hit it on the head. You want to do something for your child while you're still here. So thank you for asking that.
I'll text you my email.
Oh yeah, I'll put my email in the chat. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question. With all the work you're doing with housing, do you ever come up with having to educate people like finances, just basic finances, banking? Because I also find like I was never taught in school. My parents never talked about just basic investing even and like how to grow wealth. Because isn't that also part of housing? Is if you can buy a house, you're growing your wealth and then spreading that onto your next generation. So do you find that part of your work as well, or is that related at all? And is there anything we can do to help with moving that forward to the education aspect?
I love that. So I have a course, and I know my website was on my my presentation, and I'm sure Jill can share it. But I have a course called "There's Oil in Housing" that specifically talks about what you're just saying. There's oil in housing, right? It's a money maker, but you have to do it right. Now, just the quick tidbit, one of the things I train on is how to do it right. Home ownership isn't necessarily the best investment if you're looking at investing in housing. And I'm going to say that in regards to just kind of the common sense model is if you are selling cookies, do you eat your cookies? See what I'm saying? If you don't use your product when you're selling it, you have to be detached from it, right? So if you're really into housing, and I always distinguish between that when I'm educating folks, hey, are we talking about you buying a home to stabilize your family, which will slowly build wealth and equity, but that takes decades? Or are we talking about housing as an investment, as passive income, right? And maybe a career down the road. I'm trying to build some. It's two different conversations, right? So you're absolutely right. I definitely talk about it because you have to understand, remember I talked about earlier, money. You have to understand what it is, how you use it. It's a resource. It's not something to be put in your pocket. It's not something to wear around your neck or drive in, right? It's a resource. It can really do great things if you use your money right? So yes, I definitely talk about that. I just break it down and I'm really clear with folks when I'm educating them on what are we talking about? Do you just want to buy a home? Which is fine. Let's talk about a land trust program. Let's talk about Habitat for Humanity. Let's talk about a first-time homers buy, FHA program. Let's have that conversation. But if you're talking about investing, well, then just what you said, we have to talk about math. Do you know, and I call it housing math. Do you understand the numbers? Because now we're talking about knowing certain things, debt to income ratio, credit score, savings, consistency in work, business plan, because now it's an investment. So yes, ma'am. I definitely talk about that aspect in my courses because you need that holistic education. And if you don't talk about money, you're not talking about housing. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay.
Go ahead, Em.
Okay, I had seen hands earlier. But yeah, I guess my question was, like, what are your feelings on the fact that housing is linked to profit, like something that is like a basic need for everyone to live stable lives is so linked to really complicated systems and systems like meant to bar many people from having access to them. And yeah, how do you move through that, especially coming out of, like the carceral system, which, functions in the same way of like almost prosecuting poverty, but like in a system that creates poverty. And yeah, I don't know, how has that relationship been with like trauma informed care? Like, how did you learn that, and has it, yeah, how has it grown? I guess that was like many questions and kind of a comment as well. But yeah.
Okay, no, that's perfectly okay. That's perfectly okay. So I'll try to weave some of that in, but I think I heard the question being about the profit and housing, how I feel about that, right? How does that, right? Obviously, with the trauma that I've been through in housing and being homeless, right? How does that play in? Okay. So that is an interesting question because I am an owner, but I'm also a renter. Now, some folks don't understand this, but it's really straightforward. When I got my apartment, I had a 2-bedroom, 1,000-square-foot place for $750 a month, and I only had utilities to worry about. So I knew my rent, all my housing would be about $800 a month. Just one of my places, and this is just a single-family home I have in St. Paul. I rent for $1,700 a month. So if you understand the math, it doesn't make sense for me to live in that place and not make any money off it when I can live in an apartment. Because before this, it was just me. I didn't have a child. It was just me, right? So in answering your question, it's tricky because I'm gonna tell you something. As both a renter and a landlord, it's not as sweet as people think. There's a lot of taxes involved. You have to account for people tearing stuff up because normal wear and tear happens. And there's an overall cost to housing that people don't understand. And I'm gonna be okay. And this is a point, landlords, right? I know there's this term slumlords, and yes, there are unconscionable landlords, right? Like I can't stand it, right? But I will tell you, about 95% of landlords get into this business for the right reasons. And I'm gonna say that because if you just want to make money, if it's really about money, you don't become a landlord. You don't become a landlord, you flip properties. It's about money. I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to deal with rent roll. I don't want to deal with excuses. I don't want to have to deal with flipping and turning units and staff. I am just going to buy it, increase the income, increase what it's worth, and then sell it. And then I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to do that again. Right? So being a landlord in itself, understand that a lot of times they get into it for the right reasons, but they don't understand what they're getting into. The property starts getting in kind of dismay. They're not making repairs, and before you know it, you're behind. They miss a payment or two, something happens, right? And the reason I'm telling you all this is when I talk to tenants, I want them to understand the landlord's woes. You have to kind of understand what's going on, because if you can have that conversation, then you're starting to talk about the money. Listen, landlord, I understand that you have a mortgage on this place, and you're not going to make your mortgage if I don't pay my rent by a certain time. But what is that time? How do we work out that deal, right? How do I become a good tenant to make sure that you keep the place? Because I want to keep my housing. But if there's not that communication, there's not that understanding on both parts, it's usually a conflictual relationship because there's no respect. All right. So when we're talking about profit, I believe in rent caps. Now, as a landlord, a lot of landlords think I'm crazy, how they're talking about putting these rent caps, meaning a landlord can't charge over a certain amount, especially like in the city of St. Paul, the city of Minneapolis are really talking about this. But I believe in them because if you're a good landlord, you know exactly what your costs are for the year. You know your taxes, you know everything you pay. You should. And then you have a window of, for incidentals, maybe $5,000 or something that you keep, whatever. But then after that, you adjust your prices. You play with it. You factor in inflation, that standard, 2 or 3 or whatever, right? But you don't have to skyrocket it. And I tell you, I talk to a lot of landlords. I have a housing class for landlords where we talk about this. And their number one concern is, hey, Rich, man, my property is in a position where if I don't increase the rates, I'm going to lose it. And a lot of times I tell them, well, man, that's not your tenant's fault, though. That's your property. You didn't manage it, right? So there's a different conversation about maybe you need to seek funding, like in a loan versus rental increases, right? Maybe a forgiveness loan. We got COVID going on right now. Maybe look at some other funding streams. So to answer your question, I understand both sides, and I don't necessarily have an opinion because I educate both sides. And I talk about creative ways to bridge that. There has to be understanding, right? So even if you're a service provider, that's some of the conversation you should be having with clients. Understanding what you're getting into. I'm in a rental. I want to keep it. This is how I keep my landlord happy, right? So I hope I answered your question. I don't necessarily have I'm not in favor of them increasing the rents. I think that's terrible. But I do think it's a bigger conversation. It's a way bigger conversation. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, what is your response to NIMBYism? Do you have advice for communities that are supportive of a homeless shelter, for example, or, you know, a supportive housing development, and yet there's opposition? So I'm just kind of wondering what
yes.
you say to those that.
So I'm going to Jill. I know. Okay. So I lead a equity council called the Equity Action Circle, part of research for Ramsey County, and we're dealing with this right now. So unfortunately, I'm going to say no comment because we are like literally talking about how do we work with this. Because yeah, no comment. Jill, ask me that offline, please.
Oh, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Richard, I'd like to
May I
go
ask a
back to
question?
the.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. NIMBYism is not in
NIMBYism.
my backyard. So folks who want to oppose an affordable housing development, saying not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard. Yes.
That's what that stands for.
Yes. Yes. And it is folks right. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I understand we as citizens in this nation, we all deserve a voice. I'm a circle keeper. I believe in that. But my opinion, my personal opinion, that's why I'm not stating that, because I'm dealing with it in a professional matter right now. Yeah. So what are you saying? NIMBYism, thank you. Not in my backyard. Yep. Okay. I thought I heard someone saying something. Was there a question? I see Ed. Yep.
Sure. Yeah, Richard, this is Michael. I'd like to go back to the circle keeping a bit. Can you explain how that works? Is it a closed circle? Are there time parameters, that kind of thing? Or is a circle something that can be done in a more of an open neighborhood situation?
Oh, definitely. It's perfectly scalable. The last contract I had was with the city of St. Paul, actually the mayor's office. Last year, I guess that wasn't my last circle. That was the last community circle. That's more in line with what I think you're talking about. Does anyone remember Melvin Carter calling a community conversation back in 2019 around the gun violence in the cities and calling people to different communities like the community center, the church? I'm seeing some nods. Yes. Okay. So those were held in circle. If you had joined those events, there was food, there was a check-in, and then, I thought I heard a question. Okay. And then everyone got into circle and we opened up circle and we had these huge, we had an average of 250 people that attended each event and we had 3 of them. So huge circles about gun violence. So Mike, yes, they definitely can be open, but they can also be closed because you can also do circle for a more of an RJ approach where someone's offended the system. They've broken a law and you want to right that, you know, where you bring the community. You bring the person who offended and you bring the who offended against them, right? You bring them all together. That's a circle, but that's more closed, right? So it's perfect when I say scalable, you can do it all type of ways. What makes a circle is how you open it and how you make it a safe space. And then the closing, right? You always want to close out a circle. You always want to be specific about letting know people that circle's closed because it's also a confidential space. What happens in circle stays in circle. So you want to let folks know when that part's over and now we're just engaging. Now we're just having a conversation, right? So I hope that answers your question. Circles can be small, big, they can be closed, they can be open, and they can be used for an array of things. Okay, cool. Ed, did I see you had something? I thought Ed chimed on and then kind of went off again.
Thank you. I was curious about your diversion work. Kind of pre-trial instead of criminal prosecution, working with folks, as well as if you worked with people on probation, I know Judge Stevenson, a Ramsey County judge, sometimes will sentence people to attend his men's group, which is mostly young Black men, to kind of check in with their employment and their housing situation and whatnot. I was curious if you, if you could talk a little bit about diversion and if you worked at all with folks on probation.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so in a couple facets, one of the places I work with is Ramsey County Correctional Facility, which is the workhouse. Now, before COVID, I used to go in and I would teach a class in the morning, and then I do one-on-one counseling in the afternoon, right? So that's not diversion work. So yes, I do the work inside of facilities. Diversion work, though, specifically is with Dispute Resolution Center. I actually have a partnership with them where they manage a program called the Ethos program. And I know Jill's very well this, she looked into it and like, she could probably speak to it better than I could. I'm just going to be completely honest, right? But really what it is, it's a diversion program. It's okay. So just the difference, just so we understand where we're at. When you get a charge with the city, it's usually on the smaller scale, dog bites, fifth degree type stuff, low level stuff. Okay. So that's more of a city charge. When you get a county charge, that's more assaults and things that are more dangerous, a heightened, okay? So in talking about this contract, it's a diversion program for the city, all right? So I just like folks to be clear. We're not necessarily dealing with murders and assaults and things of that nature. It's lower level things, but it's stuff that can get you sent to the workhouse. It's stuff that can get you on probation, a fine. It can definitely alter your life. So what the Ethos program does is it brings folks in, and it's voluntary. It gives them an opportunity to avoid the criminal justice system altogether. It expunges their records, like it totally just takes them out of the criminal justice system. And it says, instead of you going to a hearing, maybe trial, having to get a lawyer, having a prosecutor, having a judge, having everyone in there, everyone that has to be there for this one low-level hearing, how about you go to a diversion course? And it's actually a circle. That's why I'm glad you asked us, Ed. The diversion courses we do in the Ethos program is we bring people in the circle and we sit down with the community and they talk about what they did. Hey, this is what I did. This was in the mindset I was in. This is how I was feeling. I'm not feeling like that anymore. Maybe I am feeling that way, but this is why. But they're allowed to talk openly and honestly. And then those who were offended was there. And they're able to say, hey, this is how I felt when you did this. This is what it did to my company when you did this. Right? And then the community is able to chime in in a broader perspective, how it affects everyone, that ripple effect. And what's great about this program is there's some stipulations, there's some things put in place, but once the person meets whatever it is, it's called an agreement. So whenever they reach the agreement, you send it back to the city attorney's office and their case is closed. And it's automatically expunged. So when an employer or a housing manager, or a college starts looking into you, or maybe that girlfriend, guy friend that you like starts looking into you, they don't see that your dog jumped over a fence and bit the neighbor 3 times. They don't see that. They don't see that you got into a verbal altercation, you cuss someone out, you push someone. They don't see that. And that's still nice. So that's the Ethos diversion program. And there are some other diversion programs. You're absolutely right, Judge Stevenson. He has a great group. You're right. He has a Tuesdays men's group. They used to actually we used to host them at Ujamaa Place. So I'm very aware of their program. A great program. And he operates in circle as well. So great process. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I'd like to hear your ideas or suggestions maybe for us as a district council, as a neighborhood, the community folks. What would you suggest for us exploring housing? What kinds of things should we be educating ourselves about or advocating for, or how to welcome more people into our community? Whether it's, I don't know, zoning, housing things. We're working as different groups, to improve our area. So I'd like to hear if you have ideas on what things we should be looking at, what suggestions you might have from your experience.
So So diversity is real and it's not going anywhere, right? Our communities are going to continue to get more and more color, more and more people from diverse backgrounds and diverse communities with diverse languages. So my suggestion would be continue with education, continue learning different forms of not only housing, but cultural housing. Like, how does this fit into how these folks are used to living their lives? You know, we always talk about putting people in some type of housing situation without ever thinking about where they came from and what they're used to, what they know, what they're comfortable with, right? So I always talk about educating, get to know people, talk to your clients, talk to your community, talk to your neighbors, have those community conversations. You know, I know certain councils where they'll have like these Zoom meetings and they'll just invite the community. We're gonna talk, we'll just get to know each other. And then they have an agenda, but it's all about just getting to know each other in your neighborhood. That's so important nowadays, you know. We don't talk. You can live in an apartment for 10 years and not know the person that lives right next to you. You know, you can live in a house and never talk to the people across the street. And it didn't used to be like that. But our neighborhoods used to also be better. They used to be safer. So communicating, right? But just getting to know your neighbors. You talked about zoning, right? Zoning is definitely a factor and they're changing that. And what Kim means by zoning is there's certain areas, right, where we can expand housing, where we can do a better job, and because of historical zoning laws, we can't do it. And we really need to look at that because there's a lot of communities that we can build up. A perfect example is they just rezoned some stuff in the city of St. Paul. Historically, you couldn't build along the alleyways. Remember I was talking about in California how you can build in the front and the back. Well, that's coming to Minnesota now, where you can have a house in the front and you can start building up a duplex or a fourplex in your backyard if you have the space. And it's okay for their access to be that alley, as long as it's wide enough and it meets some other requirements. They have to have a sidewalk walking around. There's some stuff, but you can literally start doubling your housing if someone just kind of literally flips a switch, if someone just makes a decision. This is a good idea. And that's what St. Paul recently did. They said, you know what? That is a good idea. We are going to increase housing by just changing our zoning laws. And now when you call the city, you say, hey, I'd like to increase, I want to help out. They have funding opportunities. They have partnerships for you. They're trying to do all types of things because they get it too. And that's where I say the communication comes in, because if you just reach out to some folks, we're all having the same thing. Like, Kim, you get it. Like, we're all having these same conversations. How do we do this better? And how do we do it smarter? I don't want to reinvent the wheel. You know, one of the things I think we need to do, like right off top, I think we need to have a top-down approach with our conversations, with our human service agencies and our county relationships. And what I mean by that is we have 87 counties in Minnesota right now, and we have 87 cowboys running their counties doing exactly how they want to do it with funding all from one place. So why aren't we all talking? We would solve a lot of problems if the counties just got together quarterly and exchanged notes. And I know that because right now I contract with about 9 of the counties, and it's amazing how I go into these meetings and they'll be talking about this amazing idea that they're going to do in housing. And I don't say anything, but I'm thinking, ooh, Hennepin County did that 2 months ago. Ooh, Ramsey County started doing that before COVID. What, you know, but they own it as a great idea. And this is what we're going to start doing now. A perfect example, COVID's going on right now. A lot of these county programs have a hang up about helping people with emergency assistance that comes from the federal government that has to be returned by December 31st. They're still fighting people on getting money over things like asset limits. I don't know when I'm going to go back to work. Everybody is hurting right now. The little money I got is going towards food and to help me stay afloat. But you're saying because I'm not broke, I can't get help. So so there's a lot of overarching stuff. There's a lot of communication that has to happen, because one of the things that certain counties are doing now is they're saying, okay, we'll take off the asset limits. So overnight, their numbers doubled of clients that can receive services. But it's unfortunate because the counties don't talk. I got to sit here and go to these meetings and slowly watch each of these counties light come on. And it's so frustrating. So yes, zoning, communication, and really just keep doing what we're doing. I mean, we're making a really good push. There's a lot of great people out there, and there's a lot of equity work going on right now. There's a lot of like racial equity committees starting in these counties, and we're starting to break down these barriers and have these authentic conversations about how do we do this better and how do we do it together, meaning bringing in the community, bringing in that culture. Yeah, so I just think we need to continue to keep what we're doing, as well as just adding some other benefits as well. Okay. Anyone else? Oh.
I guess probably one other question. When thinking about how to reach at-risk kids now, is there something that you think about in your own life that would have made a difference?
You know, that's a tough question. Not because I don't unless they have an answer, but kids nowadays are different than when I was a kid. It's different. The trauma, the atmosphere is different. It's charged, and sometimes it's negatively supported. Versus when I was a kid, people just told me, "Yeah, you young man, what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is wrong. Grow up. You shouldn't," right? Nowadays, some of the stuff's justified and rationalized. So it's a little tougher. But if I could talk to my former self, and when I talk to young kids, I have a program I do at JDC where I used to go in once a month, and I end up getting the program is because I told them I can show that even though these kids have, they're just impacted, they've done some pretty dangerous things, I can get each one of these kids to be a child just for a little while. And I prove it by getting them each to take a piece of candy. So I had this program at JDC where I was allowed to bring in candy, not gum, suckers, sticks, you know, but certain candy. And they didn't realize it, but no matter what was going on, the charges, the court, their family being incarcerated, I could get every single kid to have at least one piece of candy and smile at least once during my 2-hour group, right? So I don't know if I necessarily have an answer, but what I do with that group, and I have someone else doing it now, but what I did when I facilitated that group is I was present. I think young kids right now need a different example. And we always talk about mentorship and things like that. You know, I'm not talking about mentorship. It's easy to sit someone down and help them through some things, you know, but I'm talking about being there. You know, when you support someone, you have to support them with what you do. You can't tell them to get on the right track, but then you're not on it yourself, right? You can't support a kid out of something that you're still going through. So a lot of times it's about being that example. You know, I have a lot of kids that a couple of them are incarcerated right now. They get in touch with me and they say, "Hey man, Rich, I miss talking to you because you should just tell me what you were doing. And I know where you came from." So it was just cool hearing that maybe when I grow up, I can do some of that stuff instead of what I'm doing now. So it was that simple, just being a different example. Yeah. Well, and that's why you should use folks for this work who have been through it, like drug and alcohol counselors use folks who have been through it, right? And that's a very important part because a lot of people want to help and they don't necessarily have the capacity to do so. I'm just going to be honest. What's our time? Are we at time? I don't want to keep asking questions. Do we have, Jill? You figure that out. I don't know what our time is. So
it is 2:30.
Okay.
So we can wrap this up. Maybe does anybody have any last burning questions?
There we go. Perfect.
If not, you know, we can still continue the conversation via email. I think Richard put his email address in the chat.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, if we're calling it
I'm not seeing it in the chat.
I'm sorry?
I said I don't see the email in the chat.
I can put it in again. I'm putting it in right now. It'll be in there in 2 seconds.
And then Sharon, go ahead and go with your question. Oh, you didn't have one?
I actually have an appointment to talk to Richard tomorrow, which I am looking forward to at 3 o'clock. And so I just wanted to.
Oh my God. Nice.
I wanted to thank everyone for putting this together, and great to, it's Como's such a great community in District 10's best district here. So thanks, everybody. I need to run.
Well,
Yeah,
so nice meeting you in advance, Sharon. Okay, I didn't even realize I didn't put the name together. Yes, I will be officially meeting you tomorrow.
Yes.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay, what a small world. I love it. Okay, well, take care. Well, I
It
just
is
want
a
to say
small
thank
world,
you.
isn't it?
If I can, Jill, I just want to thank everybody for joining me today and just, respecting this space. It's hard to share the worst 30 seconds of your life with strangers. And I do this quite a bit, and I do it because I feel like the conversation has to be had. I mean, every single time I do this talk, I wear dark clothes because I sweat. I wear a hat because I sweat. I don't know if I come across as not nervous, but it's incredibly nerve-wracking. It's hard. But it wouldn't be a conversation if you folks didn't join and ask those engaging questions. So from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say thank you for having the courage to have this conversation with me. Really. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Thank you
so
so
much for
much.
being here. Absolutely. We are on a learning journey, and we're learning so much from you. So I want to thank you for that. And I guess on that note, we know how to reach each other. So if anybody's, still have any last minute questions or anything, we can certainly get in touch.
Please, please. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Have a nice Sunday, everyone. Snowing. It's snowing.
Yeah.